First up for the Mets, Roy Close, number 7 left field.
One ball, one strike. All five. Three balls, 2 strikes. Strike. 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 Strike.
Addictions follow a catastrophic failure to reach adult maturity. We notice that when a kid fails and gets on drugs, usually around age 13 or so. But do you know what should be happening around age 13? It's actually the onset of adult maturity. And without preparation, you're not going to be able to do it well at all. But do you know what it takes to reach adult maturity? See, most addicts end up being stuck in their teens the rest of their lives. It's a very painful situation. But one of the key ingredients of adult maturity is that you have to form a group identity. That means that you look out for more than one person, more than yourself. You live for something greater than yourself. Without a group identity, you get stuck in a painful sort of isolation. Or worse yet, an identity that is destructive. It hurts you and other people.
Oh my gosh, you're such a freak. You're such a loser. Look at yourself. So ugly. Getting
Hey,
nerd.
stop it!
Freak.
The way that you compensate for that is by addictions. Do you know what it takes to form a group identity? Well, one of the mandatory parts of having a group identity is learning to satisfy 2 or more people at the same time. Now, addicts don't have satisfying environments around them. The people around addicts are not satisfied because they haven't learned to do this. You see, it's a childhood task. You have to learn how to satisfy 1, that would be yourself, before you can learn how to satisfy 2 or more at the same time. So before you go swinging wildly at that strike 3, let's see what it takes to learn those childhood tasks.
Strike. Strike. Strike.
Addicts swing and miss because they haven't had the brain's equivalent of batting practice. They stay stuck in their teens because they can't form a working group identity. See, as children, they would have practiced some crucial skills that are necessary for that to form. They would be able to do key things. They need to know what satisfies. They need to have the big picture of life and be able to tame their nucleus accumbens. Nucleus, the nucleus. You didn't know we had a nucleus, did you? Our very own nucleus accumbens anyway, not just anybody else's, I'll tell you what, but yours, the one that you got stuck with. Where's my bat? Children must learn what satisfies, the big picture of life, and how to tame the nucleus accumbens. Children must learn what satisfies. Contrary to what you might think, satisfaction actually comes from small things. It tends to last about a day, and most of it comes from relationships. Addicts, on the other hand, look for pleasure. Now, pleasure you have to keep going back over and over to get more of it because you're never satisfied. You never say, that was enough. Like I say you're addicted to buying shoes. You buy 1 pair, 2 pairs, 500 pairs. When is it enough shoes? You see, that's the point about pleasure. You enjoy the buying, but you never feel like you've had enough. Children must learn the big picture of maturity. They have to learn the stages that you go through from infant to child, adult, parent. They need to know the ages at which you do that sort of a thing. They need to know what the needs are and the requirements, what they need to have as tasks at each age so that they can succeed. Things that I've outlined in my book on the stages of a man's life, because there's a lot to know. And if you know what it is, you're going to feel hopeful. You're going to say, I can succeed at this. And if not, you aren't going to succeed because maturity can't be left to chance. Children must tame their nucleus accumbens. It's a little part of your brain that craves food, air, and water. It sort of screams and carries on like, I'm surely going to die if I don't get that what I crave. The nucleus accumbens is probably about the size of this little pebble here, no bigger than a rock, and it's got such a strong capacity to dominate our lives if it's not tamed. Most of the great religions have some element of spiritual discipline that teaches you to deal with your cravings, and it's important to do this in your childhood before you get to age 13, because then your hormones, sex hormones, kick in, and that makes your whole nervous system a whole lot more irritable and jumpy. Then it's much harder to make this whole thing be quiet. Now, the things that make it be quiet are things like carbohydrates. Carbohydrates normally turn it off, and a lot of other things too can be used, like cocaine, alcohol, sexual arousal, marijuana, amphetamines, nicotine, and the opiates. They all have in common that they make the nucleus accumbens stop screaming. Taming the nucleus accumbens is very hard work. As children, many addicts didn't discover what satisfied them and couldn't face the nucleus accumbens and its cravings because they already had 2 strikes. The second strike happened before they were even 2 years old. Strike 2.
Take 2. What are you swinging at? Outlaw. Strike 2.
Addicts stay stuck in distress because they don't know how to return to joy. What is returning to joy anyway? Returning to joy means reconnecting with someone. If joy means that we're glad to be together, then reconnecting with someone is returning to joy after we've been upset. Returning joy means resynchronizing with someone who's out of tune with me. It means recovering from someone who was not glad to be with me, and finding someone who will be glad to be with me right in the middle of my distress, even if they were the cause of it, and they'll share my distress with me and help me to calm down. When I don't know how to get back to joy from distress, I have pain of not recovering. I stay stuck in distress, and the 6 big distress feelings are sad, angry, frightened, ashamed, disgusted, and hopeless despair. Here, for instance, is a mother returning to joy with her child from rage. The baby, as you see, is angry because mom wanted to take the spoons away. And if you look at mom's forehead, you see a little scowl there. That means that she was sharing the baby's anger, but now she is starting to return to joy already from your bottom lip. And here in 10 seconds, you see the 2 of them in joy again. This also can be done from sadness. The mother tunes into the baby's sadness, shares it, and in less than 10 seconds, they're back in joy once again. Or from fear. This baby was frightened by the sounds of the leaves. The mother tuned in, and again, with a matter of seconds, they were back in joy together. When your brain has direct neurological paths back to joy from each of these distress feelings, it allows a quick resolution of the emotion without having to avoid it. Where there isn't a path back to joy, you see people avoiding specific negative emotions like the ones we just mentioned. You know, if you don't stay relational, hopeful, creative, you're not proud of the way that you act, or if other people aren't glad to be with you, if you wouldn't say that your actions are exactly life-giving when you're upset and you don't calm down within 90 seconds, then you're not returning to joy. But it isn't as hard as it might sound. You see, there are only 6 feelings. I'm missing a finger here. There are only 6 feelings, 6 feelings that you have to master in order to learn how to return to joy. Anger, I just want to protect myself and make it stop. Fear, I just want to get away. Sadness, I've lost some of my life. Disgust, that's not good for me. That's not life-giving. Shame, I'm not bringing you joy. Hopeless despair, I just can't do it with the time and resources I've got. Just like you can't understand another language like Spanish unless you train your brain to do so, you know, le cuesta demasiado entenderlo, you will have to try and train your brain to get back to joy from these 6 emotions, because unless a trained brain shows you the way, you're not going to know how. The part of the brain that must be trained is called the cingulate cortex, and it curves its way through the middle of your brain in a shape that reminds me of a banana. The cingulate cortex is also known as the mother core because it's downloaded from your mother early in life. I call it the mental banana because it has that shape like a banana. It's the center for internal as well as external synchronization of the brain. This banana-shaped cingulate cortex has been described by Dr. Alan Shore as the synchronization center of the brain's emotional control system. Dr. Shore has been called the Einstein of psychiatry, and his work has finally established the neurological basis for personality development, treatment, and recovery. As we see in Dr. Shore's diagram, the central part there is the banana. According to Dr. Shore, from now on, all treatment theories must have a solid base in neuroscience. Accordingly, it's this banana in the center of your brain's control system that needs very specific training at specific times in your development. This training has some remarkably specific requirements. Because the control center is in the right hemisphere of your brain, it has to correspond to right hemispheric reality. That means that its training is nonverbal, relational. It's concerned with how I act like myself and how I act like my people. It is synchronized to shared states of consciousness, and it can only synchronize with one person at a time. You're born with a blank banana, and the banana itself only learns in relationships, but it's completely nonverbal. In fact, it doesn't understand words at all. Its language is voice tone and facial expressions. The facial expressions recognized by the banana are universal. They're common to all faces, all cultures, all languages, all races. And they're the emotions that we've already been working with. Shame, disgust, sadness, hopeless despair, joy, anger, and fear. These universal facial expressions are the way that one banana communicates with the other. When it's well trained, your banana lets you return to joy, lets you act like the same person no matter how you feel. All that training, though, is nonverbal. In order to do it, you have to synchronize with a trained banana, someone who already knows all these return to joy skills and will download them into your brain when you synchronize with them. So you see that banana synchronization is something that's learned. There are a lot of principles involved with this, but basically it's the part of your brain that lets you recover, synchronize with God, and it's in the right cingulate cortex. But the main thing that I want you to notice here is that in order to train your banana, you need a trained mind to do it. And we're talking about training when you are upset. So the key and crucial question that we must ask anybody is, will you be glad to be with me when I'm feeling upset? The banana expects to be completely trained by the time that you're 2 years old. It gets its training by duplicating the banana in your mother's brain. This training is addiction prevention. If your banana isn't properly trained by age 2, you will not get back to joy. In fact, you will need important relationships later in your life to teach you how to do that. And those relationships are recovery support. You'll recall that the synchronization center of the brain, the cingulate cortex, or the banana as we call it, synchronizes two minds. And the way it does that is by matching two kinds of energy states. A high elevated energy state we call joy, and a quiet state we call quiet together or calm or peace. When you can go back and forth between these two states, you have energy for motivation and joy. You're glad to be with other people, and then you have a chance to relax or rest afterwards and be quiet. In fact, if you disrupt a child's quiet together time, you get an overactive cingulate. It's almost like the brain goes into a cramp like you see in this brain scan here. That red part there is a red lumpy banana, and it is in a cramp from too much activity. It's not even working really anymore. This disruption of quiet together time is the strongest predictor of developing a mental illness. People also try to produce this joy and quiet artificially. Drugs, in fact, can be used to specifically trigger a joy-like state And those are drugs like speed and cocaine, while others produce an artificial quiet, like heroin, downers, and marijuana. Strike one. The addicts that have the most trouble are stuck at the beginning. They're feeling the most pain that their nucleus accumbens can feel, and most of them don't even see it coming. Strike one. They can't recognize attachment pain even when it hits them. Actually, the reason for that is that the whole attachment circuit is subcortical. Let's have a look at where it is in the brain. If we look at this diagram of the brain from down below, we see these deep limbic bonding centers, or the attachment light as I call it, because it lights up when you want to attach to somebody, and they're way down in the center of the brain. Looking at this brain scan from above, we see this person's attachment light is on. That indicates that they want to be attached to somebody. I want to thank Dr. Daniel Amen for providing these brain scans. He's got a lot of experience with these sorts of things, having scanned over 12,000 different people's brains to see what actually goes on inside, and he was gracious enough to allow me to use these. There's a lot that we can know about these attachment lights and how they respond between parent and child and between people who love each other, but we're going to talk more about that later. A lot of this information, in fact, comes from Dr. Siegel, who's a disciple of Dr. Shore, and he has shown us how the secure child actually experiences a synchronized attachment light with his parent. But what that means is that attachment is an experience of joy for the synchronized brain. Joy means that someone is glad to be with me. Joy is what creates our bonds. It's what makes us glad to have relationships with each other. In fact, as soon as our visual cortex has gotten mature enough that we can actually see what's going on around us, which is about 3 months of age or so, we start amplifying joy. Well, a very technical description, what it means is that if you smile at a baby that age, they smile back, and that makes you smile bigger, and they smile back bigger, until pretty soon you're both smiling yourselves silly. And then you rest and stop and start all over again. This goes on until about 9 months of age, which is the peak of growth and development for the joy center in your brain. Bonding reaches its peak at 9 months. The joy practice for little infants is at its peak at 9 months. In fact, 9-month-olds will spend 8 hours a day just smiling back and forth with their mothers, so mothers don't get very much done at all. It's the peak of the growth of that part of the brain. When it's growing properly, it actually establishes itself as our norm. And I like to call that joy camp, the place where we like to live, the place that we want to be all the time. It's our natural state. It sort of sets your brain's thermostat right there. It's our destination each night, and it's where we want everybody else to be as well. Everybody back to joy, being glad to be with us. You can learn more about joy and maturity. In fact, we'll be talking more about that, but you'll find more about that in the life model, which describes the joy in the brain and the joyful life, how that all fit together. We have a study guide that goes with it, and it's now available in Spanish as well as Russian and Korean, and soon out in some other languages as well. Attachment affects all levels of the brain synchronization. It produces great pain when the one you love isn't there, and great joy when they are there. And so we have these two responses, joy and pain. Interestingly enough, though, because they're subcortical in their origin, attachment pain often is unrecognized. Part of that is because the attachment has to be learned. Somebody has to tell you you're missing the one you love. Because it's subcortical, you can't be directly aware of it when it happens. You have to have somebody point it out to you. You know, that's it right there. And it's obscured by insecure attachments. If the people that you love are not really there dependably, pretty soon you get all confused about why you're having pain sometimes and not others. Also, it can mean that no one has told you stories about it, so it's not in your vocabulary. It's not part of what you think about. And finally, it's because it's related to that nucleus accumbens once again. See, the nucleus accumbens is a general purpose pleasure center. It gives you your I'm going to die cravings, of course, for food and air and water, stuff like that. But its main pain and pleasure is attachment. When you are attached to a person, it lights up, and when you miss them, it goes into pain. But it also responds to sex, and as we saw earlier, to drugs. So you see, addictions are ways of influencing our brain's attachment center. If we put these together for sexual addictions, we find then that sexual addictions develop from unrecognized attachment pain, an untamed nucleus accumbens, and an inability to return to joy, usually from shame or sad. You see, by disrupting our attachment response, we can become attached to anything. We misdirect our own attachment. We get attached to our own rush, whatever gives us our rush. Those can be objects or short-term people. And in fact, we can block attachment pain by anything that blocks or overrides the nucleus accumbens. So we can use drugs. We can give our nucleus accumbens a great rush that way. And since it turns off the attachment pain, we think that must be what we love and want. In fact, since orgasms will turn off our attachment light and override the pleasure center, we can get attached to our own orgasms and any kind of orgasm-centered sexual activity. So we see that all addictions involve a failure to reach adult maturity, to deal with the nucleus accumbens, and to return to joy from shame and the other big 6 feelings. Underneath them all, they have unrecognized attachment pain. Now, what do all these failures have in common? Well, what they have in common is a need for people. You have to have a community in order to form a group identity as an adult. You need that for prevention, and you need that for recovery. In fact, if you want to train your nucleus accumbens, you're going to have a community. If you want to recover and return to joy, you have to have trained bananas to teach you the way. That requires community. Or if you want to deal with attachment pain, you're going to have people, because that's what you're attached to. In fact, for recovery, the same thing. Who's going to help somebody when your banana strikes out? What are you going to do? Who will form a genuine bond with an emotionally unregulated person? It's a job only a spiritual family would do, a spiritual community, an intentional family. You see, most of us would know what to do with a scruffy puppy, but only in a spiritual community do we learn what to do with scruffy people. We start by learning how to grow a joyful, working banana. So let's look at what it takes and what your brain should have been trained to do to begin with so that we can learn to help it recover.